Welcome to the shack. We're about to rock. We got the Deacon, 2 and Deezy. Dr. Deezy, how about you? Stories from the shack.
Hello everyone and welcome to Stories from the Shack. I'm the Deacon and this is my good buddy DZ. We're going to talk about the history of music. We're going to start like in the 40s and 50s and take you right up to today. So take it off, DZ.
Well, as some of you might know, I'm a musician. I play in a band, so music is very important to me, and the history of it is very interesting to me. I would say it's important to me, but I should know more about it. So, but what I do know about it is when I think about the 40s and 50s and things like that, and where rock and roll started, I think of the whole Buddy Holly and things like that. That whole genre. And then from there, I saw it kind of go into the 60s, which was kind of like your psychedelic, the Beatles, or, things like that. It changed a little bit. Maybe the British invasion could be,
Yes.
could be sort of linked in with the 60s music. And I'm just giving a quick generalization of how it's changed throughout the years. And the 70s, I thought, was sort of indicative of the birth of heavy metal and rock and roll and stadium rock and things like that. Bigger bands. You got your Pink Floyd doing huge rock operas, the Wall and things like that. And you got your Dark Side of the Moons that came out of the 70s. But when I'm referring to heavy metal, I guess I mean probably your Led Zeppelins and your Black Sabbath and
yeah, absolutely.
Things like that kind of birthed that genre. And from there, from what I could see, just from an outsider looking in, is the 80s was kind of a very weird time period for music. I want to say that, me personally, I like alternative and I play alternative music and heavy metal, so I was more looking at that, that whole genre in the 80s, and a lot of the hair metal bands and things like that, they wore the makeup and all sorts of, things like that. Yeah. And but I think from there it went to my favorite era, which was the 90s, and that was alternative and grunge and the birth of some of that Seattle scene. And it was kind of, to me, it was like a mixture between a bunch of genres, a bunch of rock genres.
Well, I think every decade had its unique person that kind of paved the way for that whole 10 years.
Okay.
So let's go back to the 40s, like the big bands, Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, they had, a whole big brass section, trombones, trumpets, drummers, the whole string section. It's a big deal, big band, right? They had a lot of people. And that was pretty much dance music. That's pretty much all it was.
So when they say big band, could they have upwards of 10, 15 people on
Oh,
stage?
yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so it was in the name then.
Yeah. Well, like
big band.
Lawrence Welk. You ever see Lawrence Welk? He had a program on in the
know the name.
70s, I think, to the 80s. But he had a whole orchestra. And that's kind of what the big bands were.
Okay.
He kind of played music like that. And that was all generated. Nobody just sit around and listen to that. It was fast, it was upbeat. People doing the boogie woogie, all those kinds of things, right? So then you get into the 50s, and that's where things started changing. The big bands kind of fell out of favor, probably because they were too expensive to operate, is my guess. I don't know. But then you got your smaller groups. Like if you look back in the 50s, that's when, all the country music was really big. That kind of jumped into the mainstream. And you had, can't think of his name. He had a TV show. What was his name? Dolly Parton was on his show. I can't remember. Anyway, there were a lot of TV programs on in the 50s and the 60s that were based on country music bands and stars. And they were quite popular. I don't know if you ever saw Hee Haw or any of those programs. That they were really big with country. country was very popular. And then the other side of that, and about the same time, there were certain country bands that hopped over into rock and roll in the late 50s when rock and roll. Elvis Presley, the king of rock, they don't call him that for no reason, right? He came out with a new song, a new sound that nobody ever had heard before.
So you would attribute that rock and roll to Elvis then?
Oh, most people do.
Okay.
Most people do.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't call him the king of rock and roll lightly. I mean, seriously, he did. And he was really admired by a lot of the black musicians because they said they never saw a white boy dance like that. You know, things like that.
I have heard
that. He crossed that boundary, that was, he had, black music, white music. He kind of blended it together where, people say, hey, yeah, we could play together. So, then you get in the 60s, and that's when the Beatles, Dave Clark 5, all the guys from England, the Zombies, there's a whole ton of Paul Revere, the Raiders. So, that was the invasion from England that we often talk about.
British invasion.
And that changed from the innocent rock and roll in the 50s to the more, it's getting into the more cynical, I guess you could say.
Shock rock.
Yeah, kind of, in your face. Early on it was about love songs and, my dog ran away, what those kinds of things, right? But then, started getting kind of, more aggressive, if you will. Then you get into the 60s when you get like Jimi Hendrix.
Okay, yeah.
Those kind of acid rock, if you will, that kind of changed the whole music scene, at least in America. So everybody was trying to outdo everybody else, right? And that was the precursor for bands like Pink Floyd. They set the stage. Those groups set the stage.
The Jimi Hendrixes?
Right.
Okay.
For Pink Floyd and, the big groups in the 70s, early 70s, that had a similar sound, but it just took a step further,
Sure.
And we talked about Dark Side of the Moon, and I remember when that first came out in 73, I think it was. That was a freak out album. Guys would get high and listen to that thing and whoa, I don't know if y'all ever listened to it.
Oh,
but it can be a little freaky, right?
Oh yeah, it definitely has its ups and downs.
And and so that was, a step up from Jimi Hendrix, and his kind of, he was a little harder, I don't know if you've heard any of it, like Purple Haze and Foxy Lady.
Oh yeah. Very familiar.
One of my favorite Hendrix songs is All Along the Watchtower, which Bob Dylan actually wrote.
Yep. Yeah, I am familiar with that.
So I always thought that was kind of, eerie and, kind of trying to figure out what's he really trying to say, those kinds of things. So, they got into more of a story, that was kind of hard to follow sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, I love the music. A lot of times I'll listen to music, and I've listened to songs for years, and I have no idea what the words are.
There's an element of mystery to it.
Because I'm just listening to the music. Yeah, right. Like, All Along Watchtower, he's talking about wildcat growling, and things like that.
Outside in the cold distance.
Yeah, and the clown, okay, how you tie it? And then another one is The Wind Whispers Mary by Jimi Hendrix. That is kind of
that is a little bit eerie if you think about it. Yeah.
So he kind of set at least in my opinion, he kind of set the stage for future artists. He had that new sound. There are only 3 of them.
Yeah. Shout out to three pieces. I play in a 3-piece band myself.
Yeah. Well, there
Power
again,
trio.
You look at ZZ Top. There's only 3 of them, and they, of course, they're more blues and southern rock, but. And that's the thing too. Then you got the blues, you got the rock, you got the southern rock. You got all these gentries coming in there, and sometimes there's not a nickel's worth of difference between any of them, right? They just call it that because that's where they live, right? But I was really fond of the southern rock in the 70s, like the Allman Brothers Band, ZZ Top, and even Pure Prayer League, Marshall Tucker Band. I don't know if you've heard of them, but
Yeah.
That kind of music. I always had a really, I just like that sound. That sound. So, and then you got into the 80s. I did not appreciate the 80s much at all. I don't really have any songs from the 80s that I really can say that. Well, maybe Huey Lewis and the News,
What was one of his songs?
New Drug.
Okay, yeah.
I kind of liked him.
Give me some Journey, Van Halen, Aerosmith,
Yeah, Van Halen.
Foreigner.
That's Van Halen, not Van Hagar.
Yeah. Well, I always associate them with the 70s, but I guess they were the 80s. But 84, I guess. Yeah, I like Van Halen. Panama, Running with the Devil, I thought was always kind of...
So were you more of a David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar guy?
I was more like a Michael Anthony bass guitar player.
Okay.
And what's his name?
Eddie?
Eddie Van Halen. Yeah. Man, that guy could light up guitar.
Oh, yeah.
He was.
Again.
I liked Michael Anthony. He had that bass guitar looked like a bottle of Jack Daniels. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Okay, yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And David Lee Roth was pretty entertaining. Like in Panama, he flies across the stage on the wire, and things like that. But it got kind of goofy later on when they started kind of falling apart. They were a garage band for a long time.
Okay, I didn't know that.
They were. They used to play parties in people's garages in Los Angeles, I think, or someplace, and then all of a sudden, boom, they just took off.
Well, yeah, that guitar playing, there's just no denying that talent.
Yeah.
It's unmistakable.
Well, and that's the thing. Rock and roll really changed guitar music forever.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think, actually, now that we're talking about Eddie, I would attribute him to that whole different style of, they call it shred guitar or stunt guitar, tricks, the trickery, the tapping, tremolo picking, stuff with whammy bars, the squeals,
really
the different noises coming out. So, shout out to him. Rest
Journey was okay too. I mean, they're okay. But yeah, probably my '80s band is probably have to be Van Halen, I guess. As far as rock, I like most of their stuff.
I did like some stuff that came out of the late '80s. The band The Pixies, they're actually attributed to starting the whole alternative Seattle sound, if you will. And I don't even know if they're from Seattle. I actually don't think they are from Seattle. But a lot of the bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and stuff like that, they would cite the Pixies.
Jimi Hendrix was from Seattle.
Was he?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah.
They've actually produced a lot of famous musicians throughout the years.
Yeah, and then you look at the Doors. They had quite an influence too. Jim Morrison was really kind of out there. I mean, he was just crazy.
Yeah, I remember watching a interview. I think Robbie Krieger, the name of the guitar player, one time, but he was just talking about Jim, and he goes, "I just cannot figure out for the life of me. I could never figure out why he couldn't just write all this normal or write all this crazy music. This rare, thought-provoking music, and just be a normal guy." And he goes, "But that just wasn't him. He was crazy. He was out there."
Yeah, he was a rebel, no doubt. He died in France.
Yeah.
He's buried over there too. But yeah, you look at guys like that and you think, wow, he's such a talent, and he's, unfortunately, a lot of people that are so gifted like him they've lost other things. Like they can't
drive a car. Some of them.
Well, they can't interact socially with people. They're just so, I don't know how to describe it. They just have this super talent that no one possesses, and then that's all. They can't interact with people. They do crazy things. Blah blah blah. I think Jim Jim Morrison is a good example of that, unfortunately. He made a difference in music. I think a lot of people tried to imitate him in their sound. There was only 3 of those too, right?
There was 4 of them.
Was it 4? Okay, I can't remember anymore. But yeah, you look at that time, between the 60s and the 80s, you have that huge jump from like Buddy Holly to Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
So, is it good, bad? Yeah, I like a lot of them. Some of them I don't. I never liked grunge. I never liked rap. I never liked, alternative, I guess you call it.
Okay.
I'm a more traditional guy. I still listen to big band music, There's a song by, I think it's Glenn Miller. It's from a movie called Midnight Serenade. It was made in 1951. It's a video on YouTube if you care to watch it. It's called Chattanooga Choo Choo. You should watch it. It's hilarious.
Yeah, check it out.
You see the guy up there with a stand-up bass, and he's just, getting into it.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I like those. And then it leads into these guys are the Nicholas brothers. I can't remember their first names. They're a couple. They're brothers. They're tap dancers in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, I guess it was. And if you watch that video, it goes into another song. Can't remember the name of that. And these guys are tap dancing. I mean, they're running up walls, doing flips. They're jumping off stuff to the side, doing splits. They have got to be the 2 greatest tap dancers in the history of the world. So just if you're into that, Google Nicholas Brothers. I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the big band thing. My parents were that time, so I was kind of used to that stuff growing up, right? But I've learned to appreciate all kinds of music. Like I say, I listen to the beat. We've talked about that a lot of times. Like the chord sequence and things like that catch my ear. And I just like the beat, the music, the words. Yeah, like Nickelback, Rockstar. The words are horrible, I think, but the music's great.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things. I was talking to Tyler, Dunham's, right? That came on the radio at the store. I thought, that's one of my favorite songs. He said, really? He said, I wouldn't think you'd like that song. I'm sure he's probably because of the lyrics. He's talking about drugs, talking about taking drugs and stuff like that. And I guess I could see him saying that. And but like I say, I don't think I could sing one chorus, one line of the
It's all
lyrics.
about the beat and the music and the
I just
melody
like the
too.
beat.
Yeah.
So anyway, the music moves me, man.
I get that.
And that's the other thing too. Like in the 50s, they had the beatniks, who were before the hippies came around in the 60s. They were, outcasts. They had coffee shops and basements, and they played bongo drums and say, man, all had goatees, stuff like that. So I mean, that was kind of a short-lived thing, maybe 2 or 3 years.
Is that where they clap like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, that was a short-lived time. So, but yeah, if you look at how far music has come, would you say it's more complicated now?
Yes, I will. I would. Well, that depends. Some of the classical music was pretty complicated and pretty hard to play, pretty complex. You had to be pretty virtuistic, be a virtuoso to kind of nail it and to play it correctly. But I think that a lot of the modern heavy metal music, there's a lot of speed metal, there's a lot of different avant-garde music that is extremely complicated to play. And I personally haven't seen too much of that from like this 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I'm sure there's big band music and stuff like that. It's really hard to, like, what I mean, to transpose from a trumpet over to a guitar.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure some of that stuff would be, for me, impossible to play.
Well, yeah.
But I'm a guitar player myself, so and I've seen some of those horn sections just do some crazy stuff, some trumpets, and I'm just how the heck would I even go about doing that? You know, playing those notes in that sequence.
Yeah, well, that's another thing too. In the 50s, 60s, a lot of theme songs for television shows were really popular. Like the theme from Mr. Lucky. What's the other one? Peter Gunn. I don't know if you ever heard the theme song from Peter Gunn. Dunna 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 dunna. Those got that.
It's not ringing any bells.
Yeah, those were really popular a lot of times too. That you don't think of TV theme songs as being hit records, right?
Yeah.
But, there were a lot of them back then. So.
Well, everyone, we are out of time for tonight. As you can tell, the Deacon and I like talking music, so if you want to hear more music stuff, leave that in the comments. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Stories from the Shack is done for the night.